try not to make the same mistakes. What is also very clear is that AI helps bad people do bad things more efficiently. People try and make business really complicated, but at the end of the day, I think it's like quite simple. You've got to make things that people want, and you've got to do it in a repeatable fashion. If it was easy, everybody would be doing it and everybody would be successful. When it comes to businesses, there's really only two things that matter. It's people and markets. Really focus on having a great product and the most efficient way to deliver that product to customers. Make sure that you have a winning culture that's focused on a distinct set of values around what your expectations are.
Hey, Tim, I'm super excited to have you join me for this episode of Coffee with Closers.
Yeah, great to be on.
Can you share with our audience a little bit about your entrepreneurial journey?
Yeah, I started off my career very far afield from this technology space in politics. Originally worked for a really interesting guy named Senator Obama. He was very unknown at the time, back in 2006, 2007, and he decided that he wanted to run for president. And it's about 16 years old at the time, and I decided that I was going to join the presidential campaign for the 2008 presidential election. Joined up with the president, and then obviously ended up doing pretty well. And I decided that I wanted to go into politics myself. And so went at the age of 17, decided I was going to run for office, ran for the Board of Education in Maryland, and somehow got elected. And so served there for one term, managing 22,000 teachers, a $4 billion budget, $4 billion capital improvement plan and the like. And it's pretty interesting being in that position, but my parents are super unhappy about it. And so I decided to go back to school. So I went back to Princeton to study public policy and really focused on things like technology and politics and whatnot. And my original plan was to go back to Washington to work for the White House or an FCC or something like that, but ended up joining and entering into the startup world, and soon enough ended up at Harvard Business School. And this was around 2014 or so, and decided to essentially drop out and start my own company. End of 2013 to 2014, started FiscalNote, my first company. And really FiscalNote was this intersection of technology and politics, where we were trying to essentially build the Bloomberg terminal for law. You can imagine, for instance, like instead of looking up stocks and bonds, people could look up laws and regulations and court cases and things like that. And so we did that over the last, call it 8-9 years or so, scaled up the business, 5,000 plus customers, over $100 million of recurring revenue, got it profitable, and then took it public on the New York Stock Exchange. And in that time period, probably raised like $250 million in the private markets from folks like Mark Cuban and Jerry Yang, Steve Case and NEA, and then probably another called 200 million plus in the public markets, continue to scale our business. About 2 years ago, started a family office. And then with that, I've been doing a lot of venture capital investing, probably invested in 40, 50 plus companies. And then started investing in a lot of friends' companies as well. And so just recently looking at companies like Nitra in the healthcare space, we're building essentially Brex for the healthcare market, Jericho Security, which is a cybersecurity company focused on AI detection in cybersecurity, and then Amber Technologies, which focuses on building a vertically integrated car insurance product for electric vehicles. So really being involved in categories that I'm interested in and engaged in, and trying to make a difference in the world at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's an interesting story. So you started your early days in politics and was going to pursue that. And obviously, I'm assuming being from Asian upbringing, I'm pretty sure the parents were not very happy with the not pursuing educational route. But has there been any sort of entrepreneurs in your family history? Where did that entrepreneurial desire came about?
No, my parents are both academics. And I think it was more just a desire to make a difference in society. And I think that in the previous generation, like that difference would come from practicing law or publishing papers or making a difference from a scientific perspective. My father's a scientist, but I think from a kind of 21st century perspective, that same desire probably is manifested maybe originally through some politics, but most eventually through building companies and scaling technologies for the broader public.
Mm-hmm. So where did the idea for FiscalNote come from?
It really came from my interest in technology and politics. And I'd always admired the business models of Bloomberg and Thomson Reuters and FactSet and others. But I think that the ability to be able to, really understand the world's laws and regulations was something that I was very interested in. The idea for FiscalNote was to essentially build a global digital repository of every law and every regulation, every country on the planet. One click, you can look up capital gains in Indonesia, and another click, you can look up taxes in Japan. Another click, you can look up real estate regulations in Mexico. Just to be able to understand what governments around the world are doing instantaneously, I felt would be a very powerful platform. So that's what we built. And this was really at the time of 2013, 2014. If you recall, the information in the news was around things like Uber being banned or Airbnb executives getting dragged off to jail and stuff like that. And it just seemed like that this problem of private sector and public sector conflicting was only going to continue to increase in the future.
Yeah, and especially as the organization trying to expand internationally, they would need to know before they even go invest into a country, what would the legal ramifications for it. So are mostly your customers, is it like a two-sided marketplace where you have customers that are private companies that are trying to find the law before they go do something stupid? Or how do you make your money?
So we're essentially Bloomberg Terminal, right? So we sell data sets to our customers. So we collect laws and regulations and court cases from 80 different countries. And then we'll go to DOD, FBI, CIA, FedEx, Blue Cross Blue Shield, Goldman Sachs, Chevron, whatever, and ask them, like, what countries are you interested in? And we'll charge you $20,000 a country per year. We have some customers that pay $2, $3, $4 million a year to access the world. And then maybe we have a local credit union or a hospital paying $15,000, $20,000 a bucks just to look up Nebraskan legislation and congressional regulations or something. But that's like the main portion of the business. And like now we're in Europe and Korea and Japan and Singapore and Australia and parts of Latin America, and really just expanding the business quite broadly.
Are you leveraging AI in some ways in terms of making this data more easily accessible, or how to make like informed decisions from the information that you already have in your database?
Yeah, we're fundamentally an AI company, I would say. Like we collect billions of pages of regulations from around the world in multiple different languages. We use everything from machine translation, categorization, summarization technologies to be able to analyze instantaneously the state of Mexican regulations or whatever the case is. And then we'll go out and use generative technologies to be able to generate summaries or reports around what's going on around the world. And so it depends on what that looks like, but I think we've been pretty successful at doing that. We've also partnered with OpenAI, Google Bing, with Microsoft Bing, Google Bard, as we've taken our technologies and built out our own language models and the like. And so I think we've been pretty successful at establishing ourselves as the market leader in the legal AI space.
So obviously, was this the first business, or were there any other failed startups or anything that is not very public information?
I had some like college startups and stuff like that, just stuff that I would try with my friends, little apps and stuff. But this was the first like true venture backed company that I started.
Yeah. So you went from this startup, just came out of college, had some political background, and went to I think was it Princeton, or you said you went to Stanford to start the MBA program, right?
Yeah. So I undergrad at Princeton and then MBA at
Harvard. And then you dropped out to go start this company. And then you decided to go raise $250 million. And what was that experience like? This young kid just wanted to go raise that much money to go build this database.
It wasn't all at once. We raised 1.3 million from Mark Cuban and Jerry Yang, actually through a cold email. And then we raised the following year, like $7 million in our Series A. And then our Series B was like $10 million. And then we just kept raising more and more money along the way to expand our sales team and build more products and stuff like that. I don't think there's anything magical. We just worked every year to make the business a little bit better. And I can't remember the exact numbers, but I think we did $20,000 in our first year, and then like $600,000 in our second year, and then like $2.5 million in our third year, and then $6 million in our fourth. We just kept growing every year. So it wasn't like there was this like pivotal, like skyrocketing moment. We just, every year we hired a lot more people. We got some more customers. We launched like one or new products, and just kept compounding from there.
Yeah. So how you said that first customer, the 20,000, how did you get that first customer? Did you do a lot of market research or product market fit sort of research? Because obviously you saw that there was a need because obviously people were getting in trouble, like you said, right? Like the Ubers of the world were actually having a lot of legal battles at that time. But did you go in and ask companies, like, would you pay for this if I had this data available to you at your fingertip?
Yeah, no, of course. I literally had a Google spreadsheet where I was cold calling like hundreds of customers, prospective customers, and recording their feedback around what price points they'd be willing to pay and what their pain points were and what they'd like to actually see in a product. And it was quite direct, I would say, in terms of doing the market research myself. And then for the first customer, I can't remember exactly how we got that customer, but I think it was literally like it was like through a personal relationship with a professor or something, as a lot of first customers are. And then I think beyond there, we just kept cold calling and just reaching out to customers and building a customer base.
Yeah. Have you been able to maintain a relationship with those early investors like Mark Cuban after the company got to where it is today?
Yeah, of course. They're great supporters of the business.
Yeah. So certainly you've had a lot of success, right? You've mentioned that now that you've built this financial investment company, you've been able to invest into a lot of other ventures as well. So what are some key lessons you learned in the process of building that first company, getting it to go public, and then now investing into other companies that are also in a fast growth pace?
I think when it comes to businesses, there's really only two things that matter. It's people and markets. And there's people try and make business really complicated. But at the end of the day, I think it's like quite simple. I don't care if you're selling like hamburgers or cars or like software or whatnot. You've got to make things that people want, and you've got to do it in a repeatable fashion. So in my kind of philosophical context of business, there's two main functions of business. It's like product creation and distribution. And then like everybody else exists to basically support those two pillars. And like when you look at that system of what a business looks like, what it comes down to is, do you have the right people building the right products? Do you have the right people building the right distribution mechanisms? And then you follow that up with, are we in the right market overall that's growing and scaling and creating new demand all the time? Like those are the two main things, the main things that I look at is just having the right people in the right markets. And whether you're building a company or investing capital, like at the end of the day, it's the same thing. Like building a company is a function of investing time, and building an investment firm is a function of building capital, but you're still selecting the right market opportunities and the right people to work with to get to the right outcomes at the end of the day.
Yeah. What were some of the challenges that you faced when you were building? Obviously, you've developed those philosophies after having built a couple of successful companies. But what were some of the challenges that you faced in the early days of building that business?
Every mistake you can think of, I've probably already made. Picking the wrong executive, picking the wrong market to build in, scaling the wrong product. There's just so many countless lessons like along the way. You only learn that from making the mistake. And it's just something that you can learn along the way.
Yeah. So obviously, you've mentioned you've raised over $250 million. The company is worth over 1.5 billion, if I'm not mistaken. Right today, it's worth over a billion. $1.5 billion. You've created a lot of value for all the early investors, and obviously successful as you are as an entrepreneur. But obviously, along the way, you must have had some lessons learned. What are some lessons you could share with our audience of having built that successful company?
I think it just comes down to what I was saying before, which is really focus on having a great product and the most efficient way to deliver that product to customers.
Mm-hmm.
And then make sure that you have a winning culture that's focused on a distinct set of values around what your expectations are. And then from a markets perspective, make sure to select a market that's growing very quickly in a problem set that people are increasingly need solutions for. I think those are the canons of business. I think people try, like I said before, try and make things like too complicated, I think, in startup land. But that's, if you follow those like principles, then I think you more often than not, you'll probably end up successful.
Yeah. So when did you realize, okay, now I have so much free time on my hand, I got to go raise some capital and go invest into other companies? Because most people are already consumed by one business, especially a public company. It's not that easy to run. There's a lot more financial scrutiny. There's a lot more responsibilities that come with that. So how did you manage to have the time to go and raise more money to go invest into other successful companies?
A lot of it was my own money personally.
Mm-hmm.
So just kept rolling that forward and scaling it. I never went out and raised any institutional money or anything like that. But
Mm-hmm.
having personal conviction in companies and ideas and markets and spending time with people that I want to spend time with. That's, I think, what it came down to. At some point, I sat down, I said, here are the markets I want to be involved in. I want to be involved in like healthcare and energy and cybersecurity. And maybe in the future, I'll be involved in like some aerospace and real estate and things like that. Like those are areas that I have a lot of passion and interest for. And even if it's not, I basically just want to spend a lot of time in each of those areas.
Mm-hmm. So clearly you figured out the time management really well to be able to do all of these things super well. So how have you been able to buy back time to have the luxury of the time to be able to focus on the main company that's actually running and growing, and then as well as all being able to be a board member and co-founder in some of these other ventures? How do you structure your day and your time for that?
I think it just comes down to being uh, around people that are really smart and hardworking.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's much more beyond than that. If you surround yourself with executives and founders and other investors and stuff who are similarly passionate about the areas that you're passionate about and are working very hard, you have a very strong team around you to focus on the things that are the most important. I don't think there's like any secret. Sometimes I watch these like YouTube videos or Instagram things and people say, oh, you got to try this time management technique or whatever. I don't subscribe to any of that. It's more just, I literally have a blank sheet of paper in front of me and I write down the things I need to get done today. And then that's like my time management piece. But beyond that, I like to say that I surround myself with some really smart people who work really hard and make life easier for everyone around them.
Yeah, obviously you're making it super simple, but I'm sure you have some mental system and structure that actually is helping you do what you do. But clearly, what there has to be some system or framework that you've built for managing all these companies that you're involved in, right? So, are there some sort of a KPIs and expectations that you've helped develop so that the leadership is able to bring to you those numbers, so you know the company is headed in the right direction, that they are following the vision that you've casted?
Yeah, I don't. I think that's like the process of getting those numbers and whatnot. I would defer more to like core day to day operators and stuff.
Hmm.
And not to say that I'm not day to day. It's just it's not like my forte isn't like getting in the weeds and then figuring out how to pull out business metrics and stuff like that. I do think to your point, like the nature of business is everyone likes to talk about the hockey stick growth, but
Hmm.
the hockey stick growth happens when you have like billions of dollars of capital and just blowing it on marketing. And of course, you're going to get growth. I think the nuts and bolts of business are like when you're in a not great market and you need to eke out an extra 3% of growth and you need to like cleave out $1 or $2 million of cost to hit your profitability numbers for that quarter or for that year. That's where you get really deep into the weeds and you start making some really nitty gritty decisions. So for me, I do align around metrics a lot. Like I will tell like, CEOs or general managers or whatnot, I want to see X metric every day, and that I want to know the drivers of those metrics. And the metrics themselves aren't that complicated, sales metrics or GMV or payment volume or whatever it is. But I think what I'm interested in is apart from the number itself, what's driving that number? If it's higher than what we'd expected, why is it higher? If it's lower, why is it lower? If we're seeing low conversion rates in the middle of our sales funnel, is it because it's a product issue or a price issue, a competitive issue? If we're not spending enough time talking to customers, is it because our branding isn't resonating or our messaging? So I try and be like very diagnostic about what the issues are, and that's what ultimately I've been driving to at the end of the day.
Yeah, and obviously, once a business gets to a certain scale, a lot of things becomes a lot simpler because you have some really smart people to drive a certain functions of that organization. But in the early days, a lot of businesses do struggle. Like you said, in the early days, you were cold emailing Mark Cuban, you were cold calling companies to try to find out if they would buy the product. So, how was the transition of you starting to delegate some of those key responsibilities to other team members? What was that like? Because I know the biggest problem most founders have is that giving up responsibility because you don't know who can do better than you.
Honestly, I just assume there are people that are much better than me at most things.
Mm.
So I don't have an ego about things. Like if you're the best at like demand gen marketing, you probably are way better than I am. So it's in the best interest for me to bring you onto the team and then have you go do it. Like I have no ego about that. I think my role in any situation is like diagnosing the problem and then defining the milestones and then making sure that there's the right team to get it done and then you're getting out of their way. Like that's like how my management philosophy around people and solving problems. I'm not going to sit there and say I'm the best expert at everything. Like that's just false. But again, like I said from the very beginning, I don't think business should be that complicated, especially in the early stage. You're building a product and selling it, like, and that's basically it. And you can increase in complexity over time. Like you can add agile systems and scrum systems, and you can put in like different web frameworks and whatnot. And you could put in place like different SEO and demand gen tactics and content all that stuff like to build the business. But ultimately, it just comes down to are you building a great product and you selling it to customers? And I think that like in the early stages when you're just trying to get traction, like you just do whatever it takes to do those two things. If it means like picking up the keyboard and coding yourself, that's what you need to do. If you're selling a direct to consumer product and you need to go and hand out flyers on the street, I will literally sit there. I'll go out with early team members and we'll go pass out flyers. It doesn't, whatever it takes to get the distribution started. But beyond that, yeah, as you start to scale a system, like it's the key is just building a really great team that's been there, done that, and be able to scale a business.
Yeah. So obviously you mentioned in the beginning of the conversation that you're investing into several companies, some that are actually overseeing the EV insurance product offerings, one that's actually focused on the cybersecurity and one on focused on like the AI and the future of AI. So all these different ventures that you're investing into, certainly you have a lot of insights into those industries. What's your perspective on where the AI is headed and how do business people need to be preparing for what that change may look like?
So I think there's a positive and a negative, right? So the positive is that you're going to see a lot more productivity. And we're already seeing that across the board in very small ways. I don't think that we're going to be in a situation where anyone's automated out of their job. just yet, maybe in the mid to long term. But the
Mm-hmm.
short term, we're seeing a lot of AI agents and co-pilots and stuff like that, and seeing a lot of success there overall. I think that that'll probably improve productivity like 20 or 30%. So what that means that what used to take a team of 6 to do, you could probably do with a team of 3 or 4. And that's a pretty big leap forward in terms of productivity increase and being able to get more things done in general. I think the negative aspect of this is that regardless of how you feel about automation or AI technologies or their advancements or whatnot, what is also very clear is that AI helps bad people do bad things more efficiently. Obviously, certainly AI helps improve efficiency overall, but it's agnostic to whether you're a good person or a bad person. So you could be more efficient at serving patients in a hospital. You can also be more efficient at helping malicious actors hack into enterprise systems or to scam and phish and fraudulently steal money from individuals and the like. And I think that we need to be open-minded about where the opportunities are and then build the defensive mechanisms to be able to reflect the threats that may pop up over the next several years or so.
Yeah. And obviously, like you said, there's good and bad in all of them. But obviously, we want more people, the good actors. Having had some experience in the public policy space and also in the politics, what's your take on the government's involvement in just regulating a lot of these AI driven things? Because I know sometimes being a capitalist, sometimes you don't want the overreaching of government just controlling everything that an entrepreneur or someone with a vision is able to do. So, what's your perspective on that?
The government is obviously necessary for any new technology. I think it's foolish to think that the government isn't going to get involved at all. I think the government needs to set standards around responsible use of artificial intelligence. It needs to enforce some of the existing laws in our books. And so I'll give you an example. Credit underwriting is obviously very large, and people have been talking about automated mechanisms for using credit underwriting and the like. In the US, at least, we've got pretty strict regulations around things like civil rights, around things like explaining to consumers why they were rejected for credit or why they were accepted for credit and the like. And things like explainability and artificial intelligence are very important for those purposes, which isn't always the case. And so that's one big bucket of things. There's probably another big bucket around national security, around responsible use of artificial intelligence, around things like ballistics or automated defense mechanisms for the way that we protect ourselves. So I think that ultimately the government is playing a very active role in these conversations, as they should be, in terms of the importance of leveraging responsible use of artificial intelligence.
Understood. Obviously, you've founded several companies. You've raised over $500 million in revenue. You took one company public. You're investing into a lot of fast-growing companies, and you've been involved in Obama being elected as the president. So there's been a lot of things that you've accomplished in your career. Of all the things you've accomplished, what's the one thing you're proud of, the most proud of?
I think I'm really proud of building products that our customers use, and then building building companies where people feel like there's a strong mission of what they're trying to accomplish.
Mm-hmm.
And the most amazing feeling as a founder is you have this idea, you put on a PowerPoint presentation, and then you fast forward 10 years, and then there's 1,000 people wearing the company's t-shirt, like working on this idea and this product that you had thought up many years ago. And the sense of responsibility and satisfaction of having created something from scratch, I think is really a great feeling. And I think like the title of like founder is not thought about in a philosophical sense a lot, but founders, like, they have this vision of the future of what they want to accomplish, and then the ability to bring capital and people and resources and ideas and technologies and customers to make this happen. And so I have a lot of, like, just beyond myself, just a lot of respect for founders who are trying to build something from scratch and try and make it happen.
Yeah, they take a lot of risks, and obviously they're, like you said, they're able to visualize a future that's better than where we are today. And oftentimes I think we do put a lot of obstacles. That's why I'm opposed to a lot of government regulations at times, because a lot of times it only puts more roadblocks for innovation as opposed to creating more innovation.
Yeah, sure.
Because obviously, like you were talking about early days with the what do you call, like the Ubers of the world, they were dealing with a lot of scrutiny and a lot of problems, especially with all the regulations. And even now with all the 1099 changes that they want to push on these gig economy could also be a big problem for entrepreneurs as well. But clearly you've been successful, even though your parents were disappointed in the early days of you not going into college. So what's their perspective now, having seen where their son is today?
My parents are getting a little older, and I think they just want their kids to be happy and not worry too much and stuff. It's different, but not too different, I would say.
Huh. What advice would you give parents about just people, their kids following their passions or trying to figure out what they want to do with their life? What advice would you give parents?
I think it would be to give people an open mind around where things may take them. I think, at this point, I've seen like a lot of different iterations of people that have been successful in their lives. And success doesn't have to come through some external thing. It's great if people are gold medalists and take companies public and whatever and blah, blah, blah. But sometimes people are just very satisfied, like living great lives and happy lives. And so I think it's just a function of being open-minded about how people define what that is. And I'm not a parent, but not yet at least. But I think my own personal philosophy would be to let my future kids explore a bunch of options and then really go deep on things that they're really passionate about.
Makes sense. What advice would you give entrepreneurs who are visionaries that are trying to find a new company or come up with a new product?
I think it's actually quite similar. I think you're going to work on something for a really long time, and it's going to be very hard. And there's going to be a lot of people that tell you that you're wrong. And so you need to have a lot of conviction in it. The thing about business is, in my opinion, if it was easy, everybody would be doing it and everybody would be successful. And I think the best business opportunities may, in fact, come from an opportunity that only you see, and where everybody is telling you that you're wrong, but in actuality, the market shifts and you're right. And I think having strong conviction in your ideas and then being able to work through that is something that I, in reflection, probably, play up a lot more.
Mm-hmm. So knowing what you know today, what advice would you give the younger Tim?
There's a lot, honestly. It goes really granular, from focusing on the right people, spending time on the things that you care about and that you think are the most important. And then I think just learning to accept failure along the way. Not that I'm at peace with it. It's just that it's just something that you have to do along the way to get to the next phase of your own development, I think, as a person, as an entrepreneur.
Yeah. And is there anything that you regret, or is there anything you would have done differently?
I don't know if I regret anything. I think there's a lot of stuff that I would have done differently. Hindsight is 20/20. And so obviously the next time that goes around, I'm trying not to make the same mistakes and trying to learn from my past for sure.
Sounds good. Well, I appreciate your time, Tim. Thank you so much for sharing your life lesson and wisdom with my audience.
Yeah, happy to be on.
If you enjoyed this video, please share it. To make sure you never miss an episode, please subscribe.